Tonight, you will probably sleep alone or maybe next to one other person in a quiet room with the door shut. Your ancestors would have found that terrifying. Not lonely, terrifying. For nearly all of human history, sleeping by yourself was not a preference. It was a death sentence waiting to happen. And the way your ancestors actually slept, pressed shoulder to shoulder in a pile of bodies, was not primitive. It was one of the most sophisticated survival systems your species ever built. But the real answer is far stranger than safety in numbers. It goes all the way down into your nervous system, and it is still running tonight, whether you notice it or not. Start with the obvious question. Why sleep in a pile at all? Cold is part of it. A single human body loses heat fast once the fire dies down. 10 bodies stacked together lose almost none. Anthropologist Carol Worthman, who spent decades studying sleep across cultures, found that in most traditional societies studied around the world, solitary sleep was essentially unheard of. People slept touching, skin against skin, breath against breath. It kept core temperature stable through freezing nights without a single blanket. But cold is not the real reason. Cold you could solve with fire alone. The real reason is darkness. Night, for early humans, was not restful. It was the most dangerous stretch of the entire day. Your ancestors had poor night vision. Predators did not. A single sleeper, alone in the dark, was slow to wake, slow to react, and completely blind to what was approaching. A group sleeping together solved this with something almost embarrassingly simple. Someone was always slightly awake. Sleep researcher Carlotta Gurioli, who has studied sleep architecture in hunter-gatherer groups, found something remarkable. Not everyone in a sleeping group enters deep sleep at the same time. Some members stay in lighter stages longer, some wake briefly and settle again. Across a group of 10 or 15 people, this staggering means the camp, as a whole, is never fully unconscious. One person's light sleep covers another person's deep sleep. The group becomes a single organism that never fully closes its eyes. You still carry the wiring for this, right now. Ask yourself why hotel rooms feel wrong the first night. Why a strange house makes you wake at every creak. Researchers call this the first night effect, and it was first documented in sleep labs by Yuka Sasaki and her colleagues, who found that one half of the brain stays measurably more alert than the other when a person sleeps somewhere unfamiliar. One hemisphere rests, the other keeps watch. That is not a glitch. That is a lookout posted by a mind that still expects to be sleeping in a group, in a place it knows, surrounded by people it trusts. When none of those conditions are met, your brain quietly assigns itself guard duty. Here is where it gets stranger. The pile was not just about predators. It was about temperature of a different kind. Emotional temperature. Anthropologists who study small-scale societies, including work associated with James McKenna, one of the most cited researchers on human co-sleeping, have argued that close-contact sleep in infancy and childhood regulates something deeper than body heat. It regulates the nervous system itself. A child sleeping against a parent's body shows steadier breathing, steadier heart rate, fewer stress hormones circulating through the blood. Contact is not comfort. Contact is calibration. Now stretch that idea across an entire tribe. If skin contact regulates a single child's stress hormones, imagine what 15 bodies pressed together did for an adult who had just watched a hunt go wrong, or lost a companion to illness, or lived through a season of hunger. The pile was not just protection from claws in the dark. It was protection from the corrosive, slow-burning stress of simply being alive in a hard world. Every night, the group medicated itself with proximity. You do not get that anymore. Which brings you to something you have felt, but probably never named. Why does sleeping alone, night after night, quietly wear a person down? Why do so many people report their best sleep of the year happening on a trip with friends, on a shared mattress, in a crowded cabin? Despite worse conditions, worse mattresses, worse everything? Because for one night, your body remembers the arrangement it was built for. Modern sleep is an evolutionary experiment with almost no precedent. Private bedrooms, locked doors, silence enforced as a virtue, solitude marketed as luxury. Your ancestors would look at a soundproofed bedroom the way you might look at solitary confinement. Quiet, safe-looking, and deeply wrong. There is a twist here that most people miss entirely. The pile was not peaceful. It was loud. It smelled. Someone always had a cough, an elbow in the wrong place, a snore that never let up. Group sleep was not a soft, dreamy arrangement. It was crowded and uncomfortable in ways your modern brain would find almost unbearable. And yet it worked, because your nervous system was never actually optimizing for comfort. It was optimizing for a very different variable: certainty. The certainty that if something happened in the dark, you were not the only one who would know. So why does silence feel unbearable to some people even now? Why does an empty house at 2 a.m. feel louder than a crowded one? Because silence, to an ancient nervous system, does not mean peace. It means nobody is watching. And a body built across hundreds of thousands of years of group sleep does not know how to interpret that as anything other than danger. There is a modern mirror to almost every part of this. Think about how many people now sleep with a phone glowing on the nightstand, a podcast murmuring through earbuds, a fan running just for the noise of it, a dog at the foot of the bed. None of these are random habits. They are modern stand-ins for an ancient arrangement. White noise machines exist because true silence unsettles a brain built for a sleeping camp. Notification sounds get checked compulsively at night because part of you is still listening for the group. Even the popularity of sleeping with pets fits the pattern. A dog cannot fight off a predator, but its body heat, its breathing, its simple presence quiets a nervous system that still expects company in the dark. You have replaced 15 bodies with a smartphone and a golden retriever, and it mostly works because the underlying need never went away. Only the solution changed shape. There is one more layer worth sitting with. Some researchers studying attachment and stress physiology suggest that solitary sleep may be linked to subtly elevated markers of stress hormone activity overnight compared with co-sleeping arrangements, particularly in early life. The evidence is still developing, and no one is claiming solitary sleep is dangerous, but the direction of the finding lines up with everything else here. Your body was built expecting company at night, and its stress systems still seem to notice when that company is missing. Consider what happened the moment humans started sleeping apart. It did not happen all at once. It happened slowly, over thousands of years, tracking almost exactly with the rise of permanent shelters. When your ancestors lived in open camps, sleeping apart from the group meant sleeping exposed. Walls changed the math entirely. A hut, a longhouse, a stone cottage, all of them offered something a campfire circle never could: protection without proximity. For the first time, safety and closeness became separable. That separation kept accelerating. Private rooms appear in the historical record surprisingly late, and even then, mostly among the wealthy. For most of history, ordinary families still slept crowded into one or two rooms, children piled with parents, siblings sharing beds well into adulthood. The fully private bedroom, the one you probably sleep in tonight, is a strikingly recent invention. Historians who study domestic architecture note that solitary bedrooms only became common in Europe and North America within the last 2 or 3 centuries, spreading alongside industrialization, wage labor, and the idea that privacy itself was something to aspire to. 2 or 3 centuries sounds like a long time. It is nothing compared to the hundreds of thousands of years your nervous system spent assuming the opposite arrangement. This mismatch shows up in stranger places than the bedroom. Think about why open-plan offices exhaust so many people, while the same people report feeling oddly comforted working from a busy coffee shop. Silence surrounded by strangers who are not paying attention to you reads as safe. Silence in true isolation does not. Or think about why long-distance truck drivers, alone for days at a stretch, so often report the radio as essential, not for entertainment, but because a voice in the cab quiets something a fully silent cab does not. Even grief follows this pattern. People who have lost a partner frequently describe the physical bed itself as the hardest part, harder sometimes than the empty side of the closet or the unused toothbrush. Sleep researchers who study bereavement note disrupted, fragmented sleep is one of the most consistent findings after the loss of a co-sleeping partner. Not sadness alone. A body that spent years calibrating its rest around another body, suddenly recalibrating around absence. None of this means modern solitary sleep is broken. Humans are adaptable, and most people do eventually settle into private sleep without obvious harm. But the adjustment is not free, and it is not instant, because it runs against several 100,000 years of default settings. There is a final piece of the puzzle, and it explains something almost everyone has experienced without understanding why. Have you noticed how quickly a shared sleeping space starts to feel normal, almost immediately, even with strangers? Students on a school trip, crammed to a hostel room, often report better sleep than expected, despite noise, despite unfamiliar surroundings, despite people they barely know. Soldiers describe the same thing about barracks. Festival campers describe it about tents pitched a few feet from other tents. The moment other bodies are present and breathing nearby, an ancient switch seems to flip, and vigilance quietly stands down. That switch does not care whether the people around you are family, friends, or total strangers. It only seems to care that they exist, and that they are close. None of this means you need to sleep in a pile tomorrow. It means the next time you cannot explain why an empty house feels too quiet, or why one weekend crammed onto a friend's living room floor left you sleeping better than a month in your own bed, you will know exactly what is happening. An old, patient part of your nervous system is still running its original program. Watch for danger. Listen for others. Rest only halfway until you are sure the group is safe. Tonight, you will probably sleep alone, or maybe next to one other person, in a quiet room with the door shut. And somewhere underneath all of that, 100,000-year-old instinct will still be listening for the rest of the pile.